Sì, perché alla fine il vocabolario quando state scuola quello è in francese, quando devo dire diario di classe, non dire giornale di classe.
Esatto. Queste frasi americane francese con gli autori.
Agostino, 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 Agostino.
E lui anche oh, you're sorry,
Here person, he's already, he's on the way, yes. He's good. Non può andare a questo.
yes, correct.
Commissaria. Dei limitations from the. Hai detto tu stai. Sarà schedato.
Allora, ci siamo yeah.
Yeah, so well.
Systemized training and the children
For my dear. I think I'm really just Hi, how are you doing?
Why now? So he was so much so yeah. She had explained about culture planning. Commissioner. Access. And then towards the left side, the you, Jessica. Yeah, so there was one really. Whatever you want to we can ask those entirely. I don't exactly. And then we go to the floor. Yeah, things will be one speaker left there. You can take a video. Yeah, there's enough to say. Exactly, and I'm sure there's another break now. That's okay. I always the time is so just to make a clear the rules. So then we go there. Okay. Yeah. Then I'm second, then you, yeah, and then Jessica, and the same afterwards for the second question. Yeah, next person, no, but Annalisa, yeah, you. And just. That's the one. If you have any questions, please ask me. It's fine. I adapt. No, I don't necessarily know. I can be also spontaneous. Yes, sir. So when I ask for the needs, no, I don't. The topic some things because I just more like every night. That's why I like to do it. It's just
it means it's already there, you don't need to reinvent every time. So, and really, it says so nicely with the old, so but I like the papers for that to exactly. Okay, that's it. Because really, that's the it's definitely during the end of that years or as and that's that.
It's right.
Here. It's there, it's for free. It's actually, sometimes so well, but yeah, you can actually share. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Someday, one of them might be what? There's a good right. Even if it's first year. So, one thing. So that. No, it's just, she would yes, that's that was. Yeah. 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 Oh, we were very, no, it's been changed. It's good. Thank you so much. We will start in a few minutes. We're just waiting a few more people to come up and the host of the event itself. The glory. Just so please. Yeah, the sugar was just. Okay, so I think we have the hosts ready to welcome us. So thank you, Theodore, from EVPP. I will to the floor to welcome everyone.
Fine, I will be very short. Thank you very much for being here. We call that the Red House. We are still waiting for the graphics for the walls and also video television. Place as it is right now. We are very happy to have you here. My colleagues will also attend the meeting. I unfortunately have also to go to EFTA because we also have the event there. But again, welcome everyone here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Theodore. So we are, as mentioned by Theodore, hosted by the Vet House, a new building and a new opportunity venue for many organizations in the vets and broader sector can actually be hosted in this. So we were very thankful that we could host our event, the final conference of the iBox project that it's not just a final conference and it's not just a project. It's actually a much broader mission and part of the objectives of the lifelong learning platform. For those of you that don't know the platform, I represent an organization that gathers more than 40 European networks in a very wide range of the education sector, starting from early childhood to adult education, lifelong and likewise. And as every year, this is the 14th edition of the Lifelong Learning Week. There are 20 more events happening throughout this week. We started yesterday. This is just the second day. And as we are starting this event, there are a few more in parallel happening in different places in Brussels, hosted by the different members of LLB. So as you probably know, the calendar is quite full for the whole week. But today, and for this occasion, we want to spend some time with you. We are a small group, so that will allow a lot more dynamics and exchange of ideas and practices. As I said, it's not just a final conference of the project. This is not a typical project where we have to present findings to you, but rather an approach that we had to inclusion in education and training. And our approach started many, many years ago. So it was not just in the framework of this Erasmus project financed by indeed the European Commission, but it started much earlier when we, as organizations, as Lifelong Learning Platform, but also some of our members, we started to question ourselves, meaning that not only education and in the classroom had to be inclusive, but we as organizations had to actually live by that belief and had to really also be inclusive ourselves. So questioning ourselves meant to actually train the staff that are working in different organizations, in different education and training institutions, being them formal, non-formal, and informal training providers. So it was important to really look at the training for trainers' needs and indeed assess those needs on how we could be more inclusive, how we could apply more inclusive approaches. And therefore, we actually had the idea of applying for financial support in order to upscale this idea and in order to work with some of the partners. You will get to know more about the project today, so I'm here just to welcome you and just to thank you for being with us today and wish you a very great and successful discussions throughout the day, the project partners and the different people behind the project that have been working actively in the last 2 years will explain more about what has happened and how we can upscale it and how we can work together. So thank you very much again. And then I will leave the floor to my colleagues to follow up with the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brikena. And so as Brikena say, we are here also to present an initiative that is very important for LLP because we run it with our members and specifically with some of our members, all digital. So I'm coming little there. You can join the panel. Lea from Learning for Wellbeing Foundation, Flavia from CMA, and Carmen from Open. So you can join me here, and the idea is to present a little bit the main result of the Inclusion Box project, that it's a toolbox and a capacity building program for educators and staff of non-formal for students of organization and NGOs to be more inclusive in their practices. So, that's how you read it. Okay, I had the wrong one. So those we wanted to start with some of the feedback that we got from the participants in our capacity building activities, because I think that it was interesting to see how it was well received and why it was important for them to have a training about inclusion and diversity, and that one in specific. And so I would like to start asking each one of you, because they are the one that were in charge of the content of the training, why it was so well received and why we got those kind of feedback, and which is your specific approach to access and participation. For example, Lea, which is the approach of Learning for Wellbeing Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Can you put the next slide, please? But yeah, basically the feedback that we received, the written reviews we just saw, was really representative of the general feedback we got from participants. Because first there was this mention of clear concepts, and it's true that we usually receive good feedback on the way we offer the training that was evidence-based and that brought an expertise on the topics of access and participation. It was embedded in the learning well-being framework and approach, which is that learners are all unique. So we have diverse profiles of learners, whether it's talking about their learning profiles, but also as individuals, like with inner and external factors that will define their identity and their diversity. And we believe that learning is a lifelong journey that is supposed to lead to for every individual to fulfill their own unique potential. And throughout this learning trajectory, there are different learning opportunities and experiences that were represented by this big bubble. For the learning opportunities, each are marked by accessibility and to access. So our definition process was by addressing the barriers, like structural barriers and like conditions that would allow an individual learner to access an opportunity. So we tried during the training to address those barriers and try to understand how also diversity has its role linked to inclusion, that my colleague will address a bit more. And we wanted to demonstrate that accessibility is a threshold between exclusion and inclusion. And we try to represent through this graphic that the exclusion and inclusion are like moving forces. They're not like states. And the goal of this whole project and for all of us was really to move these barriers and try to deconstruct them and create accessible spaces. Then beyond access, we wanted to address participation. And we took different angles to talk about participation. We can define participation as attending, but we wanted to go beyond that and talk about participation as engaging in a learning process and opportunity. And so we brought this notion of power, and this was main feedback from participants, that the notion of power that we brought to the training was really engaging and impactful. So we chose to address participation as having an influence over decision-making processes. That was what we brought to the table with participants. So first, this was the first objective, to clarify those concepts. But we then wanted to make participants learn through participation, not just about our approach. And in the different modules that we did and along the training, we tried to share tools and practices with participants, so they could also build their capacity to create, design, and implement working spaces or learning opportunities that would be accessible, but also participative in a way, like it would make people participate in the designs or the processes of any activity that they will design or implement. And sorry, I check if I don't miss anything. Yes, we also wanted for participants to be able to transfer those tools and practices in their own working environment and their own activities. And that's why we also designed like case studies, and we shared personal narratives, and we try to really make this training engaging, so participants could then not only like understand the concepts and the tools, but then being able to transfer it in their own practice. And I hope we succeed, and you can always access it on the platform if you're curious about building access and participation in your own working.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I shortened a little bit the presentation of the project because we started a little bit late. But for you to know, we had three main capacity building activity. One was an online training, I think. One was an in-person training, and we already had them earlier this year. But then there is a self-paced training online, and we will give you, I don't know if you receive the little card with your code to access it. If not, we can give it to you during the coffee break. But then it is that we say, so most of the content that we pass during the training are on self-paced training as well. So thank you very much, Lea. Again, as we started a little bit later, I will ask Dea and Flavian to be a little bit confused, if you can. I also wanted to ask if people at the bottom of the room can hear us, or if we should. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So Flavian, can you tell us a little bit more about CEMEA and what is CEMEA and its approach on inclusion and diversity?
Yeah. Thank you. So my name is Flavien. I work for a French organization called CEMEA, which is 80-year-old now, and it's basically a Portugal education organization, training organization, lifelong learning organization that focuses on people, and which is influenced by the whole progressive education movement from the early 90s, the early 19th century. Sorry. So the approach of CEMEA is to try to focus on each person and give and take each person into account as a whole, and to adapt the environment and to make the environment as welcoming as possible, to put people in the best situation to learn and to be proactive in their learning path as well. So this is the history of CEMEA, and this is the approach of CEMEA. So CEMEA works on the training of youth leaders, but also in the social sector of professionals and in various fields. And the idea, which is linked to popular education, is to help people to think by themselves, to help people developing a critical thinking and be able to adapt, to think, to be able to train and to work with others in different situations. And the idea linked with diversity and inclusion in the fields of action of CEMEA, we work with in the social sector with different kinds of publics, and we train people to work with different kinds of publics. So this is a very important subject here, and the idea here, diversity and inclusion, are very vast and rich and complex concepts and topics, and there are a lot of resources already existing. So it's hard sometimes to know where to find the best help, the best information. And the approach here, or the idea, was to start from the basics and to understand the mechanisms behind or underneath those concepts. So when we talk about diversity, we can talk about a lot of things about inclusion as well, and dealing with what is diversity, what can be the characteristics of people's identity, their own layers of identities, and how we can welcome and organize a space for all those different identities and characteristics is very difficult. And when we talk about inclusivity, we talk about the relationship with others, and how do we deal with the others, and how do we try to develop empathy to understand what the others are and think and what is the reasons why they may act or react this way. So this would be the approach here to deal with when we talk about diversity, we have to deal with the subject of discrimination as well, and what are the mechanisms of discrimination, how it's built, on what it is grounded basically, and understanding those concepts help thinking of how we can adapt it in one's home situation. And I'll be concluding here. I guess that what could have been appreciated in those formats that we propose is that we don't feel alone. Understand that other people in other countries, in other types of organizations with various types of publics may face the same societal issues, societal problematics, and that there are solutions that works in one specific situation that I can adapt or I can get inspired of. And this multi-sectorial and intercultural approach of those training that we propose, I guess, is one of the factors that was appreciated.
Thank you.
It was to learn.
So let's say that now Dea and Carmen have really good for sure. But so a big part of the training was about digital transition and blended work methods. On digital, it's expertise. So please,
Yeah, I can try my answer and in my head. But so yeah, this training was focused on digital transition and blended work methods. But what we wanted to do, basically, whenever we talk about digital anything, digital everything, we cannot talk about transition, transformation, call it however you want, without actually addressing digital inclusion. So a lot of the training, a lot of the content was focused on what is digital inclusion, what is digital exclusion, and digital divide. I mean, there's so many different terms that are out there, and it's also very easy to get lost with all of them. But what we wanted to show is that how easy it is actually to first of all to exclude somebody from digital environment, and this doesn't mean that you're bad people and that we're doing it on purpose, but it's a very easy thing to do. And also, even though research can identify some of the trends, how somebody could be at the risk of digital exclusion, at the end, all of us can be at that risk eventually or essentially. Another thing that we wanted to do with the training, since we're talking about digital everything, we wanted to use different tools and to also give something concrete for the participants to leave it. So we covered, we also covered the aspect of the AI. We covered a bunch of different tools that can be used. We used Padlet throughout the training, and that seemed to be very welcomed by the participants because it also gives them an option to express themselves anonymously, so they didn't have to write in the chat on Zoom. Although that was an option too. So we also gave a couple of more options, since another point of the training was how to design a digital inclusive activities, and there we talked about universal design for learning. So we tried to also put it in practice. So basically, whatever content we're covering in the course, we also wanted to put that to show how it can be done in practice. But of course, this is just one of the way of addressing it, just one of the way how we can look at it. But the participants seem to like it. It seems to be working very well. And yeah, I'll stop here. I can talk about it a lot more.
Well, thank you so much for that. And the last thing that we wanted to present is, so we are talking about all those training and content as it was in the past, but again, we are still in the online platform and that is free of access and they will stay for a while. And then we went in depth on all those concepts in the training because we had more time. And then we tried also to summarize the main principles that every organization should comply with to be truly inclusive. And then let Carmen explain it.
So UCAN has been working on topics of diversity and inclusion and access and progression for so many years, and we were really, really delighted to be invited to do this work for the eBox project. And I'm going to read this because then I'm going to be faster. The charter is a guiding framework to empower organizations in the education and training sector to act as catalysts for positive change. And that is one of the definitions that you will find in the charter. I think that it actually encapsulates very well what we wanted to do and what we the way that we focused when we developed this charter was to identify 3 areas of work that we recommend institutions, organizations to focus to. First of all, to understand what is diversity and why it's important, and then to collaborate and to work with your stakeholders, with your colleagues and inside the organization and also outside, and then to integrate this inclusion and diversity in your own organizations and be a model for others to follow. So that is the kind of flow that we recommend. You need to understand the start working on it in a different level. So there is a poster downstairs. I think that you can actually click on the QR and you can actually find what is here as well. So you can actually click on this and you will be able to download this charter and read it. It's not a very long document, so, and it's a really hands-on and very comprehensive document that you can actually find useful and easy to guide you through this change of strategy or improving of strategy that you probably already have. So that's what I wanted to explain.
Thank you, Palma. Thank you so much. Again, as we are a little bit late, I give the floor to Alexandra to present. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Veronica. So I would like to present to you Solidar Foundation's position paper on inclusive education. This is not part of the iBox project, but we wrote a position paper on inclusive education, and I think our position is very much in line with the approach to inclusive education that the iBox project takes. So that's why we thought that today it would make sense that we would also present our position paper. A little word about Solidar Foundation. Solidar is a network of civil society organizations working on advancing social justice through a just transition. And Solidar Foundation is a learning hub of Solidar, so that's where we do our work on education and lifelong learning, and we also address internal learnings of the network. So our paper has exists of 3 main parts. So we elaborate on the conceptualization of inclusive education and challenges it faces. We take a look at some key policies at the EU level on inclusion and inclusive education. And then we show what inclusive education looks like for Solidar, and we illustrate this with some good practices from our member organizations and our network. Today, I'll mainly focus on the conceptualization, so you get a sense of how we approach inclusive education. And I would like to invite you to take a look at the position paper, so you can also take a deep dive into the key policies we described. And then I'll also go into our main positions and also illustrate with some of the case studies that are mentioned in the paper. So first of all, there's the conceptualization of inclusive education. For this, we took a look at the definition for inclusive education that is inscribed in the UNESCO guidelines for inclusion. And this definition focuses on some different parts. And the one that are most important for us is that inclusive education aims to address and respond to the diversity of needs of all learners. It aims to reduce exclusion. It wants to provide appropriate responses to the broad spectrum of learning needs in formal and informal educational settings. And it also aims towards both learners and educational staff to feel comfortable with the concept of diversity and to see it not as a problem, but rather as a challenge and enrichment of the learning environment. So on the concept of diversity, I think the iBox partners already discussed this quite well, so I won't go deeper into this. But just to say that for us, the objective of inclusive education is to give each learner the best education that society can provide, according to their own goals and capabilities, by removing barriers that prevent their presence, participation, and achievement. So, like I said, policy landscape, I'll leave it like it is. I would invite you to take a look at it in the paper. So this brings me to our position, based on some good practices from our members and our network. We identified 6 critical pointers that we believe is needed to make society truly inclusive. I'll go deeper into each of them and I'll illustrate some of them with some good practices we selected. So first of all, we believe that learners must be at the center. So like I said, education is all about responding to the diverse needs of learners and how education systems and other learning environments can be transformed to do so. So we have to make sure that informal and non-formal and informal educational settings, they're accessible to everyone. And this means that learners with specific needs must be offered tailored support. One of the case studies we selected to elaborate on is one of the International Federation of Workers' Education Association, or TWEA. And in their online labor academy, they provide an inclusive approach that is learner-centered towards digital education. So I would, in the position paper, it's more elaborated. So I would invite you to explore the case study a bit more. But now, since there's a limited time, I'm going through it a bit quick. So second of all, we believe that the whole community approach must be promoted and adopted. So we need an active involvement of all stakeholders of the learning community, because only then a sustainable and comprehensive approach to inclusion can be realized. So that's why we believe that the whole community approach must be promoted and adopted. And the case study that was selected for this one is the EchoWin project, which might sound familiar. Take a look downstairs because there's a poster on this project, since it's also mentioned in the iVox Compendium of Good Practices. And in this project, we took an ecological approach to inclusion, which is similar to the whole community approach. And this perspective challenges traditional definitions and categorizations by promoting a vision of inclusion, of inclusive education that addresses the diverse needs of students at all levels. The project focused on primary to lower secondary school and focused on the active involvement of all main educational stakeholders. I would like to invite you to take a look downstairs to the poster. You can also find a QR code with more information on the project. Third of all, our third pointer is the importance of diverse teaching and training bodies. I'm sure that the position paper on LLP will also expand on the importance of this. But yeah, we believe that a diverse educational staff is important because it offers unique perspectives derived from teachers' life experiences, cultures, and backgrounds, which can enrich their learning experience. And it also allows learners to relate to them, which is crucial for the effectiveness of the inclusive learning process. Our fourth pointer is that we see diversity as an asset to society. So I already mentioned it before. We believe that diversity is not a problem, it's not something negative, but it can be an enrichment for the learning process and for society itself. And this is actually one of the underpinning concepts to the SMILE project, which was organized by UCAT. The SMILE project champions diversity in all its forms, but focused on 3 main diversity areas. So individuals with migrant backgrounds, women in leadership, and individuals with low socioeconomic status. Also, the SMILE project is included in the compendium of good practices of iVox, so you can also find more information there. Our fifth pointer is that inclusive education must be recognized in all types of education, including non-formal, informal learning, and in a lifelong and lifelong approach. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So we see inclusion as a cornerstone principle of education. And yeah, that's why it also needs to be recognized in all types of learning. In this sense, we refer to the All-In project, which illustrates how it's possible to pave the way for fostering inclusive, non-formal education systems
by focusing on the inclusion of adult learners with disabilities. And then last but not least, mentioned in our position is that inclusive education should be a political priority. So we see at the EU level, there's a lot of policy initiatives towards inclusive education. It is high on the agenda, but then in terms of implementation, it should be more monitored and assessed. And of course, this also goes together with needed funding. And also the fact that the funding needs to be public, sustainable, and targeted. So that was a very quick overview of our position. And since the position paper, there's more than what I mentioned, I would invite you to take a look at it. But I'm also realistic. I know it's November, the energies are low, you already have a lot to read. So if you don't want to take a look at the document, I can also give you something else. So we made a policy bill, which is an interactive way to brief our members and partners about policy developments. So we also made a policy bill out of RRP. So I would like to invite you to take a look at this. It's an interactive, fun way to explore, and then you can say yourself of another reading on your list. Thank you very much. And I give the floor back to Ian.
Yes, maybe if you have any question, because sorry, I rushed everything and now we are waiting for some of
I wasn't clear. I was trying to follow everything, but you grouped together three topics, including women in leadership.
In the Smile project, yeah.
And when you said women in leadership, with the other two topics, I don't know. So could you repeat that?
So yeah, I just take a look at my notes. So the three topics that Smile addresses is three main diversity areas. So individuals with migrant backgrounds, women in leadership, and individuals with low socioeconomic status.
How do you see women in leadership coming in with the other two aspects?
Well, I don't know if you want to, because Karen was the coordinator of the project, so
It's just me, I'm trying to understand what you call me after.
Yeah, there was no trying to make it coherent there. What we did, we explore which were topics of diversity that were less addressed, because this SMILE is
So there isn't a common factor between the.
No.
Okay, not necessarily, you understand.
So the project is about higher education, it's addressed to higher education, and we had some previous documentation about areas that were not tackled well at higher education level. And we knew that, for example, disability is something that the universities address a lot and other things, but these three topics were not addressed fully. So we wanted to work in those, and that's why. And it's really totally true that it looks like, how do you?
Yes.
It's only casualty that is like that.
No, the common factor is that they're not studied topics and.
Exactly.
So that's what I didn't
Get
understand.
deep into those that were not really addressed.
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you. For maybe there's other questions for the ad hoc partners. I don't know. Feel free.
I have one question. I'm project manager from Austria. To underline that what I'm talking about, I've running since 20 years. A management agency in Austria, and 50% of my staff are people with different impairments, and so I know what inclusion means and what we are discussing here. One of the major rules in the theory of inclusion is nothing about us with us. And I want to ask you, where is the participation of people with disabilities in your project, in your result? Because I really have been surprised of the locations today and so yesterday, no chance for participation from people with disabilities.
I think this is a question for the iBooks partners, or because we're not part of the, I mean, I presented this position paper. I don't know if you want
Where there are people from the parts to be involved in these results of your project, and
One of the um, quality board members is here, I think Loredana.
Yeah.
And she has a long side, and she was actually very helpful when we were watching the documents, some of the online things, to point out which were the necessities when you are writing things for people who have problems research, for example. But yes, I understand very well what you mean.
Because this is so important. We have discussed this in so many years, and really, I know it's a little bit provocative, but so often we exclude the target group from the discussion, and that's why I'm asking for it. And also, I really I have to say this over yesterday and also today. This building is so excluding. This is unbelievable.
Can I say something, Veronica, or do you wanna say? Because we had really find a place. We had a place in the parliament and the council, when was that, 2 weeks ago? We are very aware. Because we need. We don't really, but I think we know it's still are sorry about that, but we need to try and we can challenge. And accessible back. We had it, but it was cancelled on us.
Accessibility is not the most important one. Time it's so many years and it's so from the beginning in development of each curriculum for each concept or what we are. That's why I'm and
it's fair point.
visible. So that's why I'm asking where their involvement.
No, maybe I should make clear the difference, because you were, I mean, instead of you asking a question to me, but then so the position paper represented is based on the work of our members, so and our partners, and then you have the iBox project, which of course is a project, so there's two distinct things.
Yeah, but the two, so if I can, so the two are based on the expertise of organizations that already work with those people. So it's not like something that we have brought from one day to another that was at EU level. It is actually replicating and amplifying something that already these partners have been working with the target groups that you are mentioning. And indeed, we also had in the advisory board from the European level, the European Disability Forum, and Loredana is here, so she would like to also maybe explain.
So I'm Loredana, and I'm a membership and youth coordinator at the European Disability Forum, and I was part of the advisory board of the iBox project. And whatever it was, I received documents. I'm myself almost blind, but of course, the European Disability Forum represents all, the majority, I can say, all the disabilities in Europe, and like what everything I have analyzed and feedback given, it was on the basis of positions from our members and not only as an individual. So I can assure, of course, there is always room for more, and I advise to include more and more people. But yeah, there was. And for the accessibility of the meeting, I remember Veronica contacted me so many times, so we gave, but in 2 weeks, and in 1 week we have the Access City Award, but if you want the Inaccessible City Award, Brussels is the one. So, accessible place in 2 weeks, mission impossible, obviously, yeah. That's, it's a pity that the parliament didn't keep their promise, because that was more accessible. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sorry for the delay.
Welcome, Mr. Roth. We are happy to have you here. And we were just ending the first session. Hi, I'm Marita. We're introduced the results from the iBox project and for the position paper of Solidar for inclusive education. I have pleasure to host this panel, this roundtable, with different panelists. I would like also Loredana Dixie to join here. And I will briefly introduce everyone and then I give you the floor because I know you need to run because there is a lot of things happening now in the parliament. So briefly I will introduce you, Mr. Ross, member of the parliament and also the committee of Regio Committee.
Yes.
And a champion of the European education area, rapporteur, and also a supporter of lifelong learning platforms. I'm Larissa Cannoni from DG EAC, Office for Inclusion University, and also coordinator of working group of Pathway to School Success. Loredana Dixie from European Education for and as she was introducing also the sponsor for the youth committee, and online there is Jessica Fiorelli from Asset University. She worked also for the platform, but now she's running a PhD at Asset University. So I will start immediately, so we don't lose much time. And I will ask a general question to all the panelists, but if you don't mind, I will ask 2 questions to Mr. Ross, so you can leave. And the first one, it's really general. It's inclusive education. It's addressed as education where each learner is included, where each learner can unfold their own potential and exploit this potential by learning in their own way, by accessing education according to their own needs, by providing a respectable and safe environment. Therefore, inclusion in education is a wide concept that implies different replies, following different perspectives, as you can see, from policymakers, teachers, students, educators. What is the perspective through which you look at inclusion in education according to your role, and how do you tackle and eventually reply in order to promote and boost inclusive education?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this event and apologize for being so short because today is a very crazy day in the European Parliament. Today, tomorrow, maybe we are very busy with the hearings of the Commissioner and the nomination of the new European Commission, but even more, I have confirmed my assistance to this event, but then they call us for an extraordinary plenary session with Mr. Zelensky, which will start in 20 minutes. I am a member of the Ukrainian delegation. I have to be there. So I didn't want to lose the opportunity to stay here with all of you. Thank you again, Alisa, for inviting me. What about inclusive education? Okay, I will be very concrete. I always say that education is the engine of the equality of opportunities. And this is of much importance. If we don't have accessible education for everyone, we will not promote the equal conditions to access to a real life, to each one's projects or life projects. But it is even more important when we are talking about people with special needs, with disabilities, with difficulties to afford, with the people who live in far or rural areas, people who has special difficulties to access to education. And this is for us, for our party, for our group, S&D group, of higher importance. We are all the time stressing in our political statement, and this is going to be one part of this term issue to try to make education in general in the European Union more inclusive. We need to, not more inclusive, absolutely inclusive, to guarantee that everyone, independent of its conditions, personal, physical, mental, economical, or whatever condition, can access to the same standard quality of education all over the European Union, which is the instrument in which we can base this. For us, it's very important to really develop the European education area. We were working on the past term to implement the European education area, which was supposed, and I will be a little bit critical with the European Commission. Sorry, I'm very much sorry, but was supposed to start working on 2025. We have had some progress, of course. The European Commission has not been stopped, but we need to push forward much more and much quicker than we are doing now. We need to put all the member states to a real agreement inside the agency to start developing a real education area, a European education area, as we did in the 19th with the higher European education area. We achieved it. We got it. It was almost impossible to achieve because it was 27 different university systems, and now there is only one common education university education system. We can have the same in primary, secondary, BED, and lifelong learning education, formal and non-formal education. It is only a question of political willingness.
Okay, thank you so much. And indeed, it's a political willingness, and we count on your support. And indeed, according to this new role in the Regi Committee, as I said, you have been a champion. We will heard from the Commission and from the recommendation that Mr. Cannoni is going to introduce later on the roadmap of the implementation of after-school effects, that one of the bases to boost inclusive education is to put in place a whole system approach that implies the collaboration of different policy actors from different policy sectors and from different levels of authority, national, regional, and local level. In your new role as member of Regi Committee, how do you see and consider to follow recommendations from European Education Area Midterm Review and their implementation in a coherent way, also through a cohesion policy perspective?
Okay, this is a very relevant question. I work in both committees since 2 years and a half, CAL Committee and Regi Committee, and now I am also the coordinator of S&D Group in Regi Committee. And one of the most relevant debates that we are holding today at the very beginning of this term is the future. What kind of cohesion policy do we want for the future? We are asking, we are demanding, and when I say we, I refer to my group, but I can assure that the majority of the groups we are, except these non-pro-Europeans that we do have at least 3 now in the European Parliament, or at least 2 and maybe 1/3. We are demanding some things for the new cohesion policy that we will have starting on 2027. And the main demand, and past week we had the hearing with the commissioner designate responsible for cohesion policy, is to strengthen the collaboration and the decentralization with regional and local authorities, because there is no doubt that the political responsibles that know better the needs of their citizens are those who are close to the territory. And these are especially mayors and presidents or managers of regional authorities. This is this is the first statement. The second one is that we need to strengthen and to make bigger, if possible, the budget allocated for the cohesion policy. We nowadays, it's a big budget, it's 1/3 of the multi-annual framework, financial framework of the European Union for 7 years, which means that 1/3 of the money that we allocate is directly for regions and for creating conditions to rebalance the development among different regions of the European Union. I have to explain that cohesion policy is a tool, it's a long-term investment tool to create the conditions that regions with a lower development rates can rise up to create equal conditions all over the European Union. And this is also very important to guarantee equal conditions on education access and to guarantee inclusion in education. This is the second point. The third point is that we are asking is that we need a place-based approach, which means that nowadays the cohesion policy only takes one indicator. If your region is less developed in transition or more developed, you will receive more money, a little bit less money or less money, but we say that two regions with the same GPD indicator may have completely different needs, political needs. Maybe one region has to stress a lot on education and other region has to stress a lot of in health or in motorways or in other things, other political priorities. So we have to consider different indicators, and from our point of view, and it is in our position paper that we are just finishing, we need other indicators, and in these other indicators there is level of employment, economical level of people, rates of education to people who abandon education, who don't non-success in education. And these two indicators are very important to create a real place-based cohesion policy in different regions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roth. It's very important what you are saying. We will look forward for the position paper, of course, but that to take into account that well-being is beyond the GDP. So, and well-being should be included also in the educational system to avoid the dropout or early dropout, and to make everyone who works and study in the educational system is feeling well. So thank you so much. I know that you need to run.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you...
I'm so sorry, I promised that the following event, I will stay with you more time. You have to understand that this...
it's a delicate period.
With the starting of the term, it's been crazy, much more crazy than ever. And they know from the European Commission, every one of us hoping and expecting that this ends and we can start our usual read, which is very busy also, but it's less crazy.
Okay, thank you so much. And we will share with you also the presentation that commission that you're very critical. So we can...
Just a little bit.
Exactly. But thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so it's a pleasure now to pass the floor since you have been mentioning it. Really, but just a bit, we are not too much, because you are doing a great job in terms of to boost inclusive education, inclusion in education, because there are two different concepts over there. Also to work and to bring well-being in schools, and that was. I was glad to be part of the expert group that you said as commission, and now I would like Annalisa to reply the first question that I asked to Mr. Ross. And if you wish, I can read again, because I will ask this question to you first, then to Loredana and to Jessica, that I hope not.
I think that you can say.
Yes, better let me see. Okay, sorry, Jessica, to see my back. So again, I will read again the question, the first question. So inclusive education is addressed as education where each learner is included, where each learner can unfold their own potential and exploit this potential by learning in their own way, by accessing education according to their own needs, by providing a respectful and safe environment. Therefore, inclusion in education is a wide concept that implies different replies following different perspectives. What is the perspective through which you look at inclusion in education according to your role? And how do you take an eventual reply in order to promote and boost inclusive education? So I give the floor to Annalisa first, then Loredana, and then Jessica. Since we are on time, we can take even more on your question, please.
Grazie Chiara, and good morning. I'm really very pleased to be with you this morning. Really, thank you for this invitation. I would like to start on a more personal note, since there was a little provocation coming from Rossempere. Let's say that after listening to the hearing of our commissioner designate, I have hopes. Hopes because, I mean, we all have some concern after the debate, elections, the results of the elections in June. Of course, we don't need to hide that, but I think that in the commission there are many people who place inclusion really at the heart of their policies, of their interests, and they really believe and want to continue to work on that. So I really have hope that under the guidance of Ms. Mintzato, if she's confirmed by the parliament, of course, we can certainly push forward many of our initiatives, and certainly try to work more steadily to achieve this European education area. Now, if you ask me, you were proposing a very nice definition of inclusion, which resonates with what we have heard until now here this morning. And I would say I fully agree with this definition, and this definition corresponds exactly to our vision within the European education area. One of its priorities about improving quality and equity in education. So we don't use the same terminology, but I would say that the meaning is there. Now, what from my perspective is happening, and how do we try to push it forward? Well, at the level of the EU, you know that our role is just to support member states. We cannot substitute ourselves as member states. They have full responsibility on education, policies, structures, and organizations, but we're there to support them. And as European Commission, we do that through a number of different policy tools. Of course, you have mentioned the funding. It's crucial. But we also have other tools like promoting and creating spaces for collaboration and peer learning. And we can refer here, you mentioned the working group, these European Education Area working groups, which bring together representatives of the national ministries, but also representatives of the big stakeholder organizations. You mentioned the expert group on well-being that we also set up a bit more than a year ago. We need to gather and build on the knowledge and then collective intelligence of a number of experts coming from different European countries and with different profiles. But we can also refer to the platforms, our online platforms, the e-twinning platform, which are really spaces for collaboration. Then, of course, we have targets, common targets, and we try to monitor progress against those targets. And we support we support development of innovative solutions through our Erasmus Plus program. Now, under this big umbrella then, which is the European education area, there are a number of initiatives, and I'm going just to focus on one of those that you mentioned, is Pathway to School Success initiative. So the Pathway to School Success was adopted as a council recommendation 2 years ago, basically, 28th of November 2022. And the main objective is to promote better educational outcomes for all learners, regardless of their personal situation, of their personal characteristic, family, cultural, ethnicity, socioeconomic background. That's the idea. So it's important, of course, to provide access to education, but access is necessary, but it is not enough. I mean, once pupils are in education, they really need to benefit fully from what from their learning experience. So this is what Pathways is about, really. It's like promoting better educational outcomes for all. And school success for us is also to be understood in a very broad sense, which is okay, it's about attainment, it's about achievements, it's about grades and diplomas, which is bluntly, but it's also about well-being. It's really growing as a person, really allowing the person to really unfold their unique potential. And for that, Pathways proposes to the member states a policy framework. We cannot impose anything, we can just recommend member states. And this policy framework is built on 6 main pillars. And the two main, I would say 2 enabling conditions are, first of all, there need to be a clear strategy at the appropriate level, national, regional, local, depending on the structure of the education system, based on evidence, based on data, and we need also to really constantly monitor the implementation of those strategy. And then, of course, the strategy needs to have this systemic approach and really embed measures for learners, measures concerning teachers, measures concerning the school themselves and the systems, because we heard this morning there are still barriers in many education systems, or at least they are not intended to be barriers, but they end up being barriers for certain groups of students. Now, in the last 2 years, and even more, because we started even before, we have been working towards really pushing and encouraging the member states to integrate. And you mentioned already this among our instruments, the working group and the expert group. So on one hand, the expert group on well-being and supporting learning environment was really focusing on this well-being dimension and came up last May with a number of recommendations and guidance for policymakers and for practitioners. On the other hand, with the working group, we are trying really to reflect on all the different components of the Pathways framework. So looking at curricula, looking at assessment methods, teaching methods, looking at the role of municipalities and local authorities at targeted support. And this is how we came up with this idea of a roadmap. You mentioned that. So it's nice to have a framework, but then the framework needs to be put in practice. And for that, we are really trying to build on the collective knowledge that we have gathered in this working group, build also on the state-of-art research to come up with a more concrete tool, a roadmap, which will really try to identify the key pillars for implementation. So if you really want to have an inclusive system, what do you need? You need to have whole system, whole school approaches. You need to have a very effective system of needs identification. You need to know what the needs are if you want to. And of course, the needs identification needs to be followed by immediate targeted responses. You need to build capacity of teachers, school leaders, staff and educators. You need a flexible and smart and adjustable resource allocation systems, curricula and teaching methods which are flexible enough to accommodate to the diversity in our classroom. And you need, of course, data collection and monitoring systems. Now, the roadmap, I'm already talking about the roadmap, but the roadmap is not yet published. It will be published, hopefully, beginning of December. And our idea is that it's a kind of living document, which will continue to grow and evolve, and which will embed also a number of concrete practical examples really to inspire our policymakers. So first edition probably beginning of December, and then further enriched version later on in the coming months. I'm sorry if I was here too long.
No worries, we have time and it's a pleasure to hear and to listen, the follow-up of all the activities and the initiatives that you as a as coordinator, also the pathway to school success can put in place to boost the implementation. So I pass to Loredana.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity to being here and meeting many, some of the people I have seen online, but then also meeting really the organizations and other participants. So the European Disability Forum itself, I would say, let's say, if we say it's not formal education institution, but we are educating, and our, let's say, the basis, the very important document that we take is the convention, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And the good news is that this convention, which clearly sets up the ground for many of the different areas, living areas that are important for persons with disabilities, and education is one of them. Article 24 of this convention speaks about education, and I will say what it clearly states, that states parties recognize the right of persons with disabilities to education. And then going further, because it's a 3/4 of page, this article that explains what it say in its point two further, it explains persons with disabilities can access an inclusive, quality and free primary education and secondary education. And then further on, it's very important, on equal basis with other, and more important, in the communities in which they live. I have done 20 years ago, I finished my education. And when I started, I was 250 kilometers away from my house. It was quality education at that time in a special school. Now, if my daughter has to go, I wouldn't do it because I have a good reason. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's very important. In the community, I have to miss all my friends, all my mother, my father, to as of my 7 years, when I was 7 years old, because my mom didn't want to leave me at 6 when I was supposed. She's too young, how will she do? But so what we try at EDF is for sure educating people that we have already. For the disability perspective, a definition. We don't need each and every time to reinvent the wheel. This Article 27, if people, they don't understand it, there is a whole explanation. The general comments are helping to interpret these articles. And I really like, I think it's very close to the definition that was given in general comment number 4, which explains Article 27. It says inclusive education is where students of all abilities learn together in the same classroom environment. This means students with and without disabilities. So even the person with less ability to understand a text, which is, let's say, in a convention, I think that is clear. And then in involving, creating an education system where everyone can learn together and have their individual needs met. And it goes further on, but I think this this is very clear. Everyone has personal needs. So very important to our movement to make policy makers, schools understand. All the member states have committed, have signed this convention, they ratified it, and they have to implement it. That's the good news. Now, the less good news is that, as I think one of the persons said before, we have good background, legislation and everything, but we have a problem on implementation. Then accessibility was mentioned at a point, and I want to say that what we say in our movement, and thank you so much, sir, from Austria, the project manager, you are right. We need to be there, persons with disabilities, whenever things are discussed, not only for the fun and participating like attendance, but involvement, also power. What was said in the iBox presentation project. Yes, that's very important. And yes, accessibility is the precondition of inclusion. That's what we say. You can want to make inclusion. If today you want me to read, if I don't have these braille notes, my employer put at my disposal this braille printer. I can use it. If not, I need to learn it by heart. If I have someone to read it, or if I have something, a computer with a system that allows me, but everything goes from the ways what you get. And then except that going and working on policy level, and we are also empowering our members, our organizations to know, because that's important, that I'm saying we, because myself, I have a disability, that we know persons with disabilities, we do have rights. We are not obliged to go 250 kilometers away from the house to study. That schools are obliged to welcome us and to provide with support when we are. So that is also very important, that people themselves, persons with disabilities, know about their right. And then that also we are creating different tools, of course, in-house, what we can with our capacity, and there are other of our members or members of our members that are doing much more, but we are doing already a couple of things to be more accessible, more inclusive in our organization, small tricks and tips that everyone can implement. Just to give a very little one, for example.
And then I need to.
Yes, I will stop.
Sorry, no, it's so powerful.
That's the small example I wanted to give. You have a document, for example, just go select it all, and you go and you say, this is a document in English and not in Italian with the keyboard I already wrote, because it's helpful. It will appear already correctly, the grammar and everything, the auto correction, it works. And then also someone with a screen reader will hear the English voice and not the Italian. It's one small concrete example. Thank you. And you're right, I can go on and on.
Thank you so much. No, and it's a pleasure to listen to you. I mean, but unfortunately, we have a time constraint. But we will sure that we will have other opportunity, occasion to let you teach us how we can be more inclusive also, and suggest your tips. So now, Jessica, please, it's your turn. Jessica is online, so.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, Jessica.
Perfect.
Yes.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be back with the Lifelong Learning platform and its members in the ecosystem, albeit in a different role. And thank you as well for accommodating me online. So to give some context on how I approach the discussions that we're having today, I think it's worth mentioning that in my PhD research, I am connected to the Faculty of Business Economics at the University of Hasselt in Belgium. And I research diversity and inclusion, and I give courses on that as well. And I specifically look at how to make science and technology organizations more inclusive. I think we all know that it's rather known that they do have issues in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the perspective that I use throughout my research is the concept of intersectionality, which you might have heard before. That is the idea that different social identities, such as race and gender, as well as the systems that are behind these social identities, such as racism and sexism in this case, are interconnected and mutually constitutive. And I think that using this approach enables us to see a bigger and more complete picture of all the
No. Yes.
No.
Now you're back. Now you're back. You at one point we cannot.
You lost me.
We were
That's
not
right.
able to listen and hear you. So now everything is fine.
All right.
Go, Jessica.
Right. So I was saying, indeed. So although I focus on the workplace and organizations, I see education as being interlinked in different ways. So one of the more sort of straightforward links is how we can trace inequalities in STEM, so in science, technology, engineering, and maths, all the way throughout the education pathway or different education pathways, right? Through adult training to higher education, school, and even back to nursery. So the difference in the treatment that different people have, the opportunities and the outcomes, they all start at a really young age. And when we look at the research that has been done on this, we see that it's mainly informed by the norms and ideals that we share as a society on who can be or who should be a scientist or an engineer or an astronaut. And these norms we find are gendered, racialized, classed, so by which we mean that they're informed by all these structures that are there to uphold the system. So I think it goes much further than the individual bias that we have. And so basically the intersecting systems that I see in the study of STEM workplace inequalities are very much mirrored in that of education. And I think it's something that is worth reflecting on, because I believe it implies that we need a set of actions to redress inequalities that's very wide and deep, and that actually is rather transformational, because we're talking about many interconnected structures that create the inequalities that we see at the moment. So I will leave it at that now.
Thank you. Thank you for providing also the perspective, because we were discussing this morning that inclusion or make more inclusive environments need the support of every actors involved into that environment. So if taking the school environment, for instance, every people at the staff, educators, and all teachers needs to have an inclusive approach, and as also for the organization in itself when we talk about civil society organization. So now I would like to come back with a more specific question to each of you, the three of you, and I will start again with Annalisa. We have heard, I remember as expert in the expert group that our recommendations were based really on the whole school approach. So this means that school is part of the community and needs to be supported by the community, that also provides something to do. But behind that, there is also the whole system approach. Because to put in place this kind of the whole school approach, we need all different, let's say, not only policymakers from different level, but also different sector of policies, health, education, social affairs. So in the upcoming roadmap that you were mentioning before, could you say more how this whole system approach could put in place in order, to go to the policymaker, as we have heard Ross, and say, okay, you should do for that, you should go for that.
Well, the first thing is that I would say the good news is that this is already happening. I mean, there are many examples locally at the level of school, at the level of municipalities, where this is happening in practice. Now, it's true. I mean, for us, it's in the pathways vision. It will be this roadmap, of course, because the roadmap is linked to pathways. A whole system, whole school approach is really a kind of a precondition. It's the basic, is the foundational pillar for the entire construction. And just to be more precise, it's true. I mean, you gave already a very nice definition. I would say in this idea of a whole system, whole school approach, you have, first of all, this idea that everything is connected. And you have education system, which is an ecosystem with subsystems which interact and with each other. And when you implement policy reform, you have to look at the entire spectrum, all these dimensions, all those aspects that may have and that will have, at the end of the day, an impact on the quality of the educational experience. So it's really, I would say, an idea that emphasizes the need for alignment, coherence, consistencies across policies, practices, and resource allocation at all the different levels of the education system. Need for coherence, need really for addressing in a comprehensive way. So to move away from approaches which are very short-term, focusing on just one specific aspect, fragmented approaches, but to a more long-term strategic vision. But then also you mentioned this idea, when we talk about whole system, whole school approach, is really the idea that school success is a kind of a collective responsibility. So it's the responsibility at the school level of the entire school community. The leaders, starting with them, and the school teachers, the educators, school staff, parents, but also the community around the school. Because the school, some of the challenges that the schools are confronted with cannot be solved simply with the expertise that is present at school. So you need to bring in other professionals, you need to bring other services in the school and really create a collaborative space. And that needs to be mirrored and replicated, of course, at the system level. We're talking about cross-sectoral cooperation between different policy areas, but also cooperation within the different level of governance of the education system. Now, the roadmap is offering numerous examples. We try really also in this roadmap to give some concrete examples. I said, this is already happening, so it is possible. And then it's offering some concrete tools for policymakers. First of all, a set of questions to reflect, really to prompt reflection. Like, for example, how is governance organized in the education system? How is leadership organized? Is it kind of a top-down approach, or the leadership at the level of the school, but also within the system is a more of a collaborative one? How much do you ensure that all stakeholders, the learners, the parents, the community, are involved at different moments from the design of a policy to its very implementation? How much collaborative is the culture? So how do you create your vision? I think that the idea is that the content of policy reform is as important as the process through which you develop policy. It can be top-down, or it can be really the result of a collaborative process. So through the roadmap, we are really trying to offer some checklists. A checklist, yes, that's a good idea, to policymakers to reflect more on their practices, because they're brilliant ideas, they're brilliant reform, which are not successful simply because they're kind of imposed top-down without really involving all the stakeholders from the very beginning. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Annalisa, because this is something that we can transfer and say to Mr. Ross and say, at the end. So thanks. Loredana, now I come back to you. You already provided us some tips, some practice steps to make educational system more inclusive. So could you tell more, because I stopped and you were so passionate to explain us how, or suggesting us how we can create more inclusive environment, and also which kind of support in terms of fundings and policy you could have to improve the inclusion.
Yes. First of all, it is very important, as Annalisa was saying, also a school or an educational setting is a system, and all the components of the system should receive their appropriate, let's say, support in terms of training, but also a support, other type of support. So, for example, it is very important that also administrative staff in a school or in an educational setting, they know what is on the market, as I call it, which services the state or the NGOs provide for persons with disabilities in this case, but it can be also for refugees or for what is there available. How can I get those services? That is also very important because I can go and find myself, or a student can go and find himself in a setting. Yeah, you're welcome, come in. But if I don't, you don't get the material that is accessible to you, the format, or if you don't get the support that you need, that person who comes and explains, you sit down next to you. So this is why it is very important to have them. Then secondly, support to the educators, whether they are professors, teachers, or other type of intervenience, on the spot. Like they need also to get training on how to provide alternative materials, formats. I'm having here Braille, but it can be sign language if they need, or teach them how to create from the start their learning material in a more accessible way, a methodology. So, of course, awareness on disabilities they should have, or on other topics if we are referring to other backgrounds of people who should be included. And yes, for some of these things cost. That's the reality. We can do many things on a volunteer basis, but even that costs time. So, and therefore, it is essential that I think if we are speaking about national level, that those ministers of finance and education sit together, because the finance can say, I give that much to education, but it has no clue what the education needs. So cooperation between the ministries and block budget put there available, because this is an investment. I can say that it costs much more to keep someone at home not doing anything than bringing at school and involving that person in education, in social life. So these are capital things.
So, and with this strong statement, you very linked to what Annalisa were saying, I pass also to Jessica. And so we have heard, like just Loredana and Annalisa, that I mean we need to involve different actors, different system, and Lorena was just mentioning it. Also, teacher needs to support in developing tools and practices to inclusion, and so this means that also all the people inside an organization needs to support this kind of practices and activities to inclusion. So, from your perspective, a researcher, what actions should be taken from an organizational, so institutional perspective to support equality and inclusion in learning environments?
Thank you for the question. So the very short answer is that I believe that it needs to be a deliberate choice that is integrated in everything that the organization does. And if I may bring the example of my university, the University of Hasselt, I think they have quite an interesting approach to it. So the University of Hasselt is located in the Flemish region of Limburg, which is in the east of the country. And after the downfall of the industry and the related rising inequalities, it became a very socio-economically disadvantaged region. And so because of this history, the University of Hasselt, which was founded about 50 years ago, deliberately chose to be what is known as a civic university. So this means, in practice, that we as a university take the responsibility and make a commitment to be an inclusive university that contributes to society in a positive way. This is rooted in the belief that everyone is able, but also willing to learn, and that universities are key actors in society.
So more practically speaking, we follow a model of inclusive education that is based on 6 different principles. And if you don't mind, I will briefly take you through these principles just so that you can see more in practice what this actually looks like when we try to create something that is inclusive for everybody. So first of all, we prioritize creating a sense of belonging so that the university is experienced as a safe place for everybody who studies there or works there. We have a diversity responsive approach. So that means that we recognize that students' experiences are, or that students rather experience systemic inequalities in society, so that the inequalities happen also outside of the education system, prior to the education system, and continue when they are outside of that system. And we feel that we're responsible for identifying what the barriers are and providing solutions to address those barriers. So in terms of barriers, we really mean a wide range of them. They can be from material barriers related to socioeconomic backgrounds, to physical barriers, to intellectual barriers, but also the psychosocial barriers that people may face. So in this sense, I think that it's fair to say that we strive for what is known as reasonable accommodation. So we shift the focus. We don't call it special needs because we don't think there's anything special about it, but that it's actually reasonable to accommodate students so that they can do their best. We also recognize the complexities of identities. So here we go back to the intersectional way of thinking that I mentioned before. We use the principle of universal design for learning. So we don't specifically do things for a certain group of people, but we try to make sure that the learning and teaching environment is accessible to everyone, understandable and usable for everyone. We also think that talent is not static. So everyone has the potential to learn and to develop their skills. And this is backed by a lot of research that really shows that the professor or lecturer's attitude towards what students can achieve impacts the way that they perform. So there's really this idea that you can develop, right? That you come in, the person that you are when you come in is not the same as the person you are when you go out. And lastly, we believe that inclusive education is a shared responsibility. So of course it involves the learning providers and the students, but it also involves other types of employees that don't have teaching responsibilities. And it also involves policymakers, as well as different domains of the university. So the research domain, the education, internationalization part, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think this is an example that I wanted to share because I think the idea of a civic university that serves students and society is one that I find as an interesting approach to inclusive education.
Thank you so much, Jessica, to share also your experience in the university, actually, and living in India. So we are running out of time now, and there is the coffee break. So I'm sure that everyone is willing to have a dose of caffeine after this morning and intensive morning. But I would like to close the roundtable with one word of hope. I like to have to finish with hope, from the 3 panelists in one word, how you wish inclusion in education could be in the next year. One word to inclusion in education is freedom, be yourself.
I can't give a definition, but I would say that it has to be based on collaboration between, bringing all forces together. There are so many people sitting in this room and we're all working towards inclusive education, and we need to join forces more and more.
Okay, thank you, Annalisa. Loredana.
I completely agree, and I would say is flexible, openness, flexibility that allows to shape itself, taking the form of the person who needs it. It's not what you want to be and you think this is inclusive, but it is what the person in front of you is.
Thank you so much. And Jessica.
I'm going to surprise you all and say intersectional.
Okay, and with that, I thank you all. I mean, for it has been really very insightful and a very inclusive learning process today. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
The coffee break.
I no, we
No,
don't have
no.
time for question, I guess,
If people want, there is the coffee downstairs.
Say that maybe never okay, but I think that you deserve a coffee. And that's also part of inclusion, don't we? Yes,
To be taking coffee.
Yeah. So thank you just so much. Yes, I think you can enjoy the coffee break downstairs where the welcome coffee works. And see you here in I don't know what time it is. 20 minutes. There is. So before you all leave for the coffee break, the activity that we will do after the coffee break will focus on the three main topics of iPhones that we presented in the morning, and we will divide in three different groups. One of them is going to be downstairs with my colleague Claudia, so you will focus more on exploring inclusion and diversity. So if that's the topic you're interested, you can stay there with your coffee. Here we will have a session on digital inclusion. So next to the screen, it's easy to remember screen, digital, me here. Come here. And if you wanna explore more the like access and participation, our colleagues Kiana and Leah will have a little activity to there next to the window. So window, screen, and downstairs. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Downstairs will be diverse. Okay, no, I love it. Please. I assume it's